The Kerch Strait in Crimea has been blocked. During this process, Zircon missiles were fired from the Black Sea. Systems are operational in Ukraine.
Traffic was blocked in Crimea. Systems malfunctioned in Ukrainian cities. The sky was filled with explosions. If all three happened simultaneously, it would be difficult to attribute it to coincidence. The fact that explosions were heard at different points in Crimea at the same time indicates a scenario where multiple parts of the military structure on the peninsula were pressured simultaneously, rather than an isolated strike targeting a single target. This scenario aligns with an operational logic that suggests Crimea was intended to be removed from its role as a smoothly functioning forward base. It is no coincidence that the airports in Crimea that form the backbone of air operations, such as Kerch and Saki, are at the center of the pressure. As long as such bases remain active, reconnaissance is conducted over the Black Sea, air patrols continue, and air support is transferred to the front line. In other words, these bases are the gateway to the sky for the military presence in Crimea. When this gateway narrows, the air support behind the troops on the ground also narrows. That is why airfields become targets, because when the sky slows down, the maneuvering space of the land and sea lines also slows down. There is no clear and verified table showing which specific facilities were directly hit. However, from a military perspective, the most rational targets in such attacks are runways, hangars, and fuel infrastructure. This is because whether an airport is actually operational or not depends on these three elements functioning together. When a runway is temporarily out of service, the number of aircraft inside becomes irrelevant. If aircraft cannot take off, the base exists only on paper. When hangars come under pressure, maintenance and protection are disrupted. When the fuel infrastructure is affected, the pace of flight slows down. This produces an effect that is directly felt on the ground. At the same time, the suspension of passage on the Kerch route is another element that completes the logistical dimension of this pressure. The Kerch connection is one of Crimea's main supply arteries. A slowdown in the flow of fuel, ammunition, and personnel through this route means that the military structure on the peninsula will default to a position-holding reflex rather than advancing. In other words, the goal here is not just to damage a single point, but to disrupt the rhythm of the military order in Crimea. Such simultaneous pressures force the defense side to spread out over a wide area. As the defense tries to cover every point, it cannot achieve full intensity at any point. This creates an effect that is invisible in the short term but accumulates over time. If the defense is constantly on alert, the system works but does not work efficiently. When efficiency drops, initiative on the ground also narrows. In the bigger picture, this scenario points to a pressure model that gradually erodes Crimea's role in the Black Sea. When ports, airports, and connecting lines work seamlessly together, Crimea acts as an advanced base. When this structure is simultaneously pressured, Crimea ceases to be a power-generating center and becomes a fragile area that requires constant protection. This narrows the military maneuvering space in the Black Sea not overnight, but over time. This event is not a turning point in itself, but it is like a stress test showing which points of Crimea's military architecture respond more quickly under pressure and which are more fragile. As these stress tests are repeated, the system's ability to sustain this pace becomes the key determining factor. We have just seen what is targeted when transformer stations in Crimea are attacked: cut the power, slow down the system. Now we are seeing the same logic applied from the sky to Ukrainian cities. So the stage has changed, but the play remains the same. This attack isn't something like, they fired 2 missiles and it's over. First, slow drones are sent. The goal isn't to strike, but to activate the defense. Radars are activated, batteries are engaged. Then things get serious. Missiles with different profiles come into play. Some come very fast, some glide low, some descend from above. While the defense is dealing with the drones, it is also trying to intercept these missiles. So the attack is not a single punch. It is a combination that wears down the defense. So why are so many different missiles used? Because the defense can adapt to a single threat. But if one comes from above, while another comes from the side, the defense has to be everywhere at once. This creates gaps. The goal is not to penetrate them all, but to keep the defense constantly on the run. Where are the targets? In this wave, it is not military barracks that are being targeted, but the energy and heating nodes that keep cities running. When electricity is disrupted in the middle of winter, it's not just the lights that go out. Heating fails, the water system is strained, hospitals and emergency teams go on alert. When the city slows down, the background slows down too. When the background slows down, the order at the front also suffers. Let me clarify the connection here. When transformer stations in Crimea were hit, the rhythm of military bases slowed down. Here, when the energy and heating infrastructure is strained, the rhythm of cities slows down. In one case, the military order in Crimea is slowed down. In the other, the pace of survival of Ukrainian cities is slowed down. Both moves hit the same target, the enemy's energy lifelines. The pressure being applied in the bigger picture is this: instead of attacking the front line, slow down the systems that keep the front line going. This wave from the sky doesn't change everything overnight, but if it continues at this pace, keeping the other side afloat becomes a little harder every day. When the energy of cities came under pressure from the sky, the rhythm of life slowed down. The same logic was applied years ago at the gateway to Crimea. That gate was the Kerch Bridge, and this time the issue was not, is there a threat, but an attack that actually targeted the bridge. That night, there were 2 separate explosions on the Kerch Bridge. Part of the bridge was damaged and traffic stopped. In other words, this was not a line closed due to an alarm, it was a crossing locked down because it had been hit. The form of attack was also unconventional. Explosive-laden unmanned vehicles approached the bridge from the sea. The bridge was struck not at its most heavily defended point, but at its weakest point. This demonstrated in the field that the bridge, despite being protected by large systems, could be compromised by small, silent vehicles. The impact of this explosion was not limited to the bridge itself. The main land route to Crimea was immediately closed. Vehicles stopped, supplies were disrupted, and traffic to the peninsula was cut off for a period of time. Just as life slows down when energy nodes in cities are disrupted, the military backdrop in Crimea suddenly slowed down here. When the door closes, the order inside begins to think about managing with what it has, rather than making a move forward. After this incident, the Kerch Bridge ceased to be an ordinary crossing point. Today, the reflex behind locking the bridge at every alarm is this de facto blow that occurred that night. Once a line has been hit, it is now closed not only when it is hit, but even when the possibility of being hit arises, because a single hit can lock the main flow to Crimea not for hours, but for days. What we saw today was not a single attack or a single point. The energy of cities was touched from the sky. Gates were locked on the Crimean side, infrastructure nodes were strained, different places, different times, but the same logic. Not to attack the front line, but to target the arteries that keep the front alive. This pressure model may not create a major rupture in the short term, but each time the system tires a little more. The rhythm of cities slows down, the tempo of the rear echelon slows down. And this slowdown changes the balance on the ground not overnight, but step by step. The key question here is, how sustainable is this tempo? How long can one side maintain this pressure, and how long can the other side withstand this slowdown? If you don't want to miss the continuation of these types of analyses, subscribe to the channel, and if you found the video useful, don't forget to like it. This support allows us to do more in-depth analyses in the next video. Have a good day, everyone. See you in the next analysis video.